Thank you, guys. Well, I'm really excited to be here with you today, talking to you about my books and about the writing process. When I got dressed this morning, I put on my navy blazer, not realizing we were going to be all matchy-matchy. I felt like I could pass as a student. Well, other than I'm really old, but aside from that point. So, I'm Becca Fitzpatrick. I am the author of, I feel like I'm standing in the wrong spot. I'm the author of the Hush Hush series. There are 4 books in the Hush Hush series: Hush Hush, Crescendo, Silence, and Finale. And these 4 books tell the story of a 16-year-old girl named Nora who becomes entangled in a centuries-old battle between immortals when she unknowingly falls in love with a fallen angel. I'm also the author of Black Ice, my newest book, which just came out in October. Black Ice is Britt Pfeiffer's story. Britt is 18, she's a senior in high school, and she is trained to backpack the Teton Range of Wyoming for spring break. But while she's up in the mountains, she is taken hostage by 2 men who are fugitives. And in exchange for her life, Britt agrees to help guide these men off the mountain. However, things become complicated when she develops a dangerous and unwanted attraction to Mason, one of her captors. And to give you a deeper look into Black Ice, I want to share with you the book trailer. Okay, so now we're going to travel back in time, and I'm going to tell you guys how I came to be a writer in the first place. One of the cool things, well, just by a show of hands, how many people in here are interested in writing or have tried writing a book? This interests you at all? Okay, so we've got a few of you guys. That's great. Okay, so one of the cool things about being a writer is everyone has their own journey. You know, how they become writers, because I have friends who before they were writers, they were computer programmers or stay-at-home moms, they were nurses. There isn't one set path to becoming a writer. Everyone has their own story, and this is my story. So when I was a little girl, when I was 8, I watched a movie, a classic 1980s movie. This movie came out before you guys were born, I'm sure. And it changed my life. So raise your hand if you know this movie. You guys do? Really? Do you know it? What is it?
Romancing the Stone.
Romancing the Stone. I'm so impressed. No one knows that. Okay, so this movie is, when I show this in the States, no one has a clue. You guys clearly are up on your 80s movies. I'm really impressed. You put them to shame. So this is Romancing the Stone. For those of you who haven't seen it, it's about a woman named Joan Wilder, and she's a romance writer. And she ends up having to fly to Colombia to rescue her sister from bad guys. And while she's down there, she hunts for treasure, and she falls in love with a tall, dark, handsome man. Well, when I finished watching this movie at the tender age of 8, I went up to my mom, who was in the kitchen making something, and I said, "Mom, I'm going to be a romance writer when I grow up." Because I thought all romance writers fly to Colombia to rescue their sister, hunt for treasure, fall in love with a handsome guy. It seemed like a pretty sweet gig to me. By the time I was in college, I had forgotten this dream of wanting to be a writer, and I wanted to be a spy. Laugh! I applied to the CIA twice, but they never called. So apparently, like you guys, they don't think I would have made a very good spy, but I'm telling you, I would have rocked that job. If they're listening, and they probably are, your loss. I would have been a great spy. I didn't think about writing again until my 24th birthday, and that was when my husband surprised me by enrolling me in a writing class as my birthday present. And I was actually pretty upset at him for doing this because I had specifically told him I wanted Japanese cooking lessons for my birthday. But he had known me for many years and had watched how every night I sat down and I wrote page after page in my journal, recording all the things that had happened to me, the observations I'd made throughout the day, and so he thought this writing class would be a perfect fit for me. And I can't tell you guys how intimidated I was to be in this writing class because all of the other students had graduated college with degrees in English or literature, and they'd been writing for years, and they all had a story to tell. And I graduated college with a degree in health, and I didn't feel like I had a story to tell. And then one week, our teacher gave us an assignment to write a scene showing a character experiencing humiliation. And for whatever reason, I was immediately struck by the memory of something that happened to me when I was in high school. So I was 16, I was a sophomore, I was in biology class. I don't remember exactly what we were studying, but I think it must have been human reproduction, because my teacher called on me and said, "Becca, why don't you stand up and tell the class the characteristics you would want in a mate?" And not a mate like a friend that you guys say over here, like, "Hey mate," like a mate as in someone you would want to breed with. And so, yeah, this was high school. Everyone started laughing. My face was bright red, and I sat next to this really cute boy, and he was poking me in the side. "Come on, Becca, tell us what you want in a man." It was mortifying. It was humiliating. And so in this writing class, years later, I started writing a very similar scene about a girl who's 16. She's in biology. Her teacher asks her this same completely inappropriate question. And I was having so much fun writing the scene that I went on and I wrote 1 chapter, 2 chapters, 3 chapters. And when I'd finished writing 3 chapters, I thought, this story's amazing. Everyone's going to want to read it. I better send it to New York right now to get it published. Not realizing that when you want to publish a book, you need to have the entire book written and not just 3 chapters. I didn't know that. So I sent these 3 chapters off and right away started receiving rejection letters. I love this definition of rejection. Refusal, spurning, denial, elimination. So raise your hand if, like me, you've ever felt rejection. You know what this feels like. Oh, good. I'm among friends here. That's good. Well, I want to share with you guys some of the rejection letters that I received for my first book, Hush Hush. Can you guys see that? I'm guessing you can. I did not like the way the story developed and was unsatisfied by the ending. Okay, so I should mention that as I started getting these rejection letters, people would write in the rejection letters, "Send the whole book, we need the whole book." So I actually wrote the rest of the book and I sent it back out and started receiving even more rejection letters. But I felt that the story's about Nora, but her best friend is V. I felt that V was unlikable, which is an issue, for the heroine's best friend should be someone the reader likes. Okay, this is my favorite. The first 50 pages are really good, but I have concerns about the ensuing 300 pages. You're a talented writer, but your storytelling skills need work. Oh, and the book needs a more suspenseful title. Hush Hush is a bit weedy. This woman's actually English, this literary agent, and we don't use the word weedy in the States, and so I wasn't even sure what it meant. I had to look it up, but I learned something new. It means unsubstantial. Do you guys know that? Is that something do you use the word weedy? No. Like, no. She's just a crazy old Englishman. Okay, good to know. My gosh, I love that title, but I confess I just couldn't warm up to Nora's voice. During this entire time, as I was receiving these rejection letters, I would continue to edit the book and send it back out. More rejection. Edit, send it back out. I just wouldn't give up. And now, pop quiz. How many rejection letters do you think my first book, Hush Hush, received? So, raise your hand if you think A, 25. So no one has faith in me. Okay. No hard feelings. I should mention that this was back in the day before email was a big thing. Not to date myself, but so I would have to walk out to my mailbox every day and look for these rejection letters to come in the mail. So 25 times to go out there and receive a letter that says your story isn't good enough, that's a lot. B, 50. All right. Yay, we got a couple. Okay. C, 100. A few more. And then D, 175. The people, the row who have no faith in me. Well, if you raise your hand for C, 100, you're correct. I received just shy of 100 rejection letters for this book. And it took 5 years. And I should mention that you don't send the book out to 100 people at once. Usually you send it out to 1 or 2 agents and you wait for them to read it. And then they reject you, and then you send it out to a few more. You don't send out a huge, massive amount. So this process took 5 years of me editing the book and submitting it and trying to get published. And then 5 years after I started with those 3 chapters, I got this in my email. We'd switched, times had changed, and now email was a thing. And this woman is my agent today, and she said, I think I see something special in this book. I might be able to sell it to a publisher. And sure enough, she did that. She sold it to Simon & Schuster. And here's a quote from me. The things in life that require the most work are always the most rewarding. And I have found this to be so true in my life. So I realize that not everyone in this room wants to grow up and be a writer, but you all have hopes and dreams, aspirations, things you want to see come true in your life. And the way you get there is through persistence, by having a dream and holding it close and not giving up, working really, really hard for it. And you might have 100 rejections in your life like I did, or you might have 500, but you have to stick with it, not give up. Fight through those rejections. So here's a picture of me many years ago in my kitchen at home, kissing that contract, that piece of paper that says this book I've worked so hard on is going to be published at last. Okay, so I want to talk about covers a little bit, because I get this question so often from readers. They'll say, I love the cover of your book. Why did you choose this cover? How did you come up with it? Well, something that you guys might not realize is authors typically don't have any say in our covers. That's something that our publisher decides for us. I've had author friends who didn't even know what their cover looked like until they just happened to stumble across it on Amazon. So most of the time, we don't have a lot of say. I feel really fortunate because with my first book, Hush Hush, I was given a tremendous amount of opportunity to give input. So this is my editor in New York, and she is jumping on a giant trampoline in the photographer's studio where they did the photo shoot for Hush Hush's cover. And I'll explain more about that in just a second. So one of the things that my publisher let me do is they let me choose the models who would play my 2 main characters, Nora and Patch. This is the model I chose to play Nora. She's a ginger. We don't say that in the States. We just say redhead. But I love how over here everyone says ginger. We need to do that. And then this is Patch, the boy I chose to play the fallen angel in my story. And they called these models up and they said, an author has selected you to be on the cover of her book. We need you to show up at the photographer's studio. And they told the boy model to show up wearing nothing but tight black jeans. And he was a little worried and wondered what kind of book this was. But he showed up at the photo shoot. You can see the trampoline, a little bit of it there in the background of this photo. But the fallen angels in my stories, including Patch, when they're kicked out of heaven, their wings are ripped out so that they can't fly back into heaven. They can't sneak back in. And so the model spent 2 hours in makeup getting these wing scars painted on his back. And then he spent the next 6 hours after that doing backflips and various stunts on the trampoline while the photographer was down there trying to get the perfect image. For those of you who are interested in photography, I don't do a lot of it, but you probably know what I'm talking about, how meticulous you have to be and how dedicated to get that exact image that you're looking for. Well, after the photo shoot, my editor sent over several images and said, we want you to choose the cover of your book. And I'm going to share with you some of those images. Oh wait, first, just a couple shots from the photo shoot. I think there are 2 of them, yes. Okay, so here's the first shot that they sent over. And I really liked this one because you can see those wing scars peeking out. But my agent said, he looks like a bird that's been shot out of the sky. So we didn't go with that one. Here's a very romantic one that has both Patch and Nora. But I just didn't feel like it set the right tone for the book. It was just far too romantic. Another very beautiful one, but again, just not the right atmosphere I was going for, because it's a bit of it's a scary, mysterious book as well as a romance, and I wanted to show that side of it. Another very striking romantic one. And then I saw this image, and it was right away it struck me. It was perfect, and I emailed my editor and said, this is the one. I love it, I want it. And it was her favorite too, and so the art director put up a mock cover and sent it out to bookstores, because that's something publishers will do with covers, is send them out to bookstores to get feedback. Because we always say, oh, don't judge a book by its cover, but the truth is we all do that, and that's a lot of times how we determine what we want to read. And so publishers want to make sure the cover is striking and captivating. And one bookstore in the US in particular wanted to rotate the photo. They felt it was more striking and provocative when they did. So we rotated the photo and came up with the final cover, which is this. And this process took about 8 months. Raise your hand if you're interested in graphic design or art. So a few of you. So if that's something you end up going on to study, this is something you might be doing someday, is designing book jackets for authors, which I think would be a really fun and cool and rewarding job. Okay, so you want to be a writer. So for those of you I asked, if you're interested in writing and you raised your hand, these tips are for you. However, if you don't want to be a writer, I still want you guys to pay attention, because some of these tips might help you in your essays and the writing you do for school. So don't tune out yet. Read, it's brain candy. And don't just read what you like to read. A lot of times I force myself to read outside of the box, because every different genre can teach you something about storytelling and about characterization, how to plot. So that means if you love romance novels, try reading science fiction. If you love fantasy, try reading a Western. Really push yourself to explore new genres, and you'll be surprised what you like. I actually like Westerns. I wouldn't have thought I would, but I do. Keep a diary. So, as I mentioned, the whole reason my husband enrolled me in the writing class when I was 24 was because he'd watched how I wrote in my journal every night. And I actually did this all through middle school and high school. So I'm not sure what the equivalents are here, but that's from about the time I was 12 all the way through 18 and beyond. I would write in my journal every night. And a lot of times now that I'm a writer and I'm an adult and I write for teens, I'll go back and I'll reread those journals that I kept, and I try to remind myself and really recapture those emotions of what it feels like to be 16 and falling in love for the first time, or having your friends betray you for the first time. And I'll use a lot of those experiences in my books, and I'll steal from my own life and put those stories into my books. I can think of one specific example. So, I don't see Crescendo up here, but when I was writing there's a little picture right here. So when I was writing my second book, Crescendo, I was writing this scene where the main character, Nora, and her best friend V think that this one character, Scott, is a really shady character, and they decide they're going to go snoop around in his bedroom and find evidence proving that he's a pretty bad guy. Well, how I'd written the scene was Nora and V had stopped by a fast food joint before going to Scott's house to spy on him, and they picked up some hot dogs. So they'd carried these hot dogs into Scott's house. And I knew that Scott was going to come home and find these girls in his bedroom, and he was going to be furious. And I needed a way for the girls to get out safely and have a reason for being there in his bedroom. Well, as I was writing this scene, I was also rereading my old high school journals, and I came across a story from when I was 17 involving me and a hot dog, and I decided to put that in my book. So that story is this. So when my last year of high school, my family moved to Idaho, which is in the western part of the United States. And it was tradition at my new high school in Idaho when you wanted to ask, so at this new high school, when you wanted to ask a guy or a girl to a dance, you had to do something really creative to get their attention. You couldn't just call them up and say, hey, you want to go to the dance with me? So for example, I had this friend, he was a guy, and he wanted to ask a girl to spring fling, and so he went into her house when she wasn't home. He went into her bathroom and he filled her bathtub up with water, and then he put goldfish in the bathtub, and then he put a sign on the wall that said, out of all the fish in the sea, you're the one for me, will you go to the dance with me? Things you had to do to get someone to go to the dance with you. Well, there was this boy, Bo, yes, Bo, and I wanted to ask him to the dance, and my friend, but I was worried he would say no because he was really popular and athletic and cool, and in high school I was not very popular or cool, and so I said, guys, no, I don't want to ask Bo because he won't go to the dance with me. But my friend said, no, Becca, we've got this really amazing way you can ask him, and there's no way he will say no. Well, their idea was for me to get this hot dog and put it on a plate, put it in a bun, ketchup, mustard, relish, and then put a little toothpick sign in the hot dog that said, Bo, don't be a wiener, go to the dance with me. And I said, no. No, you guys, I can't do that. But they convinced me it was a good idea, so I succumbed to peer pressure and I decided to do it. I asked Bo to the dance with this hot dog. But anyway, as I was writing Crescendo, did he go with me? I skipped that part. He did go with me, but it was actually the worst night of my life. He didn't talk to me the whole night. He just sat there on the dance floor with his arms folded over his chest glaring at me. So I learned an important lesson. Sometimes you think you want to go with the really cool, popular guys who are actually, they can be jerks, and I would have been much better off going with a sweet, sensitive, nice guy. So, lesson learned. Passing that on to you, should you need it. But anyway, as I was writing Crescendo, I was writing the scene, and here Nora and V are. They've got these hot dogs. They're snooping around in Scott's bedroom. He comes home. He storms down the hall. He flings open his bedroom door. He's furious. These girls are in his room. What are they doing there? Well, Nora holds out this hot dog and says, Scott, don't be a wiener. Go to the dance with me. So if you read the book now and you come across that scene, you know exactly where I got that idea from. But the whole point in this is to keep a journal, because a lot of times you think, oh, my life's so boring, nothing exciting ever happens to me. But the truth is all kinds of exciting and embarrassing and humiliating things are happening to you all the time. And so write these things down, because you never know when something as small as asking a boy to a dance with a hot dog will inspire a story. Join a critique group. So that whole time that I was submitting Hush Hush during that 5-year period and receiving rejection letters, I belonged to a critique group. And all of the other writers in this critique group were doing the same thing. We were all seeking publication. We were all getting rejected. And it was so wonderful to have this sense of solidarity, that we were all in this together and we were each other's cheerleaders. And I think that's one of the reasons I didn't give up, was because I had my critique group. So I do recommend, if you're a writer, find a critique group. That the first step is always the hardest, and that's learning how to share your work with other people. And if you can do that with your critique group, you can start doing it with agents and publishers. Try pantsing and try outlining. So A pantser is someone who just sits down at their computer or their notebook, and the story is just going to flow from them. They don't do any planning ahead of time. They know the story will grow organically from them. Raise your hand if you're kind of a pantser. You just sit down and, all right, so I've got a couple of you. An outliner, on the other hand, is someone who meticulously plans what they are going to write before they start writing. Raise your hand if you're more of an outliner. Just me. Really? No one else outlines. Okay. Oh wait, we've got an outliner. Yay! Solidarity. I recommend trying both because one way works for some writers, one way works for other writers. For me, outlining, I just have to do that. Before I begin writing a story, I will spend 6 to 8 weeks just planning the book and coming up with the characters and the obstacles they're going to face and the things that they want. So I know the beginning, the middle, and the end before I write a book. And I feel like that really helps me with writer's block because when I sit down to write and I can look at my outline, I know exactly what happens next in the book, it makes it a lot easier to write. And that doesn't mean that my outline doesn't change. Sometimes I'll be writing and I'm following my outline and I get a better idea than the one that's on my outline. But I'm flexible and I'll go with that better idea. I don't have to stick to my outline. But try both. Eavesdrop. This is one of my favorite tactics to employ. So when I do feel like I've hit writer's block or I don't know what to have happen in my story, or even when I feel like my characters aren't sounding very much like teenagers, I'll go hang out at a coffee shop or a movie theater with my notebook and I will just sit there and listen to teenagers like you guys, talking about your problems and the challenges you're facing, and I'll just take notes. And a lot of times I feel like that helps me in my stories to really hone my voice for dialogue and make sure my characters are sounding like actual 16-year-olds. But I guess in that I should warn you guys that the next time you're at a coffee shop hanging out with your friends, you might want to just look over your shoulder and make sure there's not some creepy author there eavesdropping on you. And last but not least, do your research. I'm always amazed at all of the interesting things that I learn when I'm researching a book and how I can put those details into my story to enrich and enliven my books. In Black Ice, my most recent book, there's a serial killer in the book. And I didn't want my serial killer to be a flat character who didn't really come across as someone believable. And so when I was researching this book, I spent hours and hours on YouTube watching footage of serial killers who are in prison and they're being interviewed by journalists. And I was trying to find similarities between all of these serial killers and really trying to figure out what motivates someone to kill time and time again without feeling remorse. And then I tried to put those details into my story to, again, make it feel really real. And I suggest that you do that too, because a lot of times you might not realize how much research goes into a book, and all the interesting ways that you can make your book so much, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, richer, I guess, by adding these details. And that concludes my presentation.